Now we're going to welcome into the show Peter Kahn. He is a two-time Manager of the Year nominee, and just recently he became the Chief Boxing Officer for Triller, who have entered the boxing space with a lot of money and big hopes and ambitions. Peter Kahn is the boxing guy behind it. And it's funny, Peter, because you see a lot of networks that have been in boxing for a long time that don't even have a boxing guy. Triller does have one, and it's you. And you have your espresso too, I see. I hope you're enjoying that. I like the little glass you have there. Looks very professional.
Thank you.
So you're chief espresso officer as well, I guess. But first off, how did this all come about? Because I think a lot of people were shocked. A lot of people know you, of course, from your days with Don King and your days managing fighters. And then seemingly out of nowhere, you're here running Triller on the boxing side.
Well, first and foremost, as always, it's great to be here with you, Mike, and Lance. Obviously I'm a big fan of the podcast, and you guys are two of the best in the business. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. And Mike, I mean, it really was organic in the way that this came about. You know, this opportunity presented itself out of another necessity. And that necessity was predicated on the Teofimo Lopez-George Kambosos purse bid. And so honestly, I did watch the Triller November show with Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr. And I was very entertained. I thought it was something I hadn't seen before. And I was amazed. Look, I've told you this before, that if I was a betting man, I would have lost everything when it came to guessing the pay-per-views for that fight. So I was very impressed, but I was more so impressed by the way that they were able to capture this wide demographic, right? You know, really being able to draw these young viewers via Jake Paul and the music artists, having Snoop as a commentator, and then being able to capture an older demographic that was maybe taking a trip down memory lane, a little bit of nostalgia, right? And, and just being able to take that all in, right? And look, there was this, I mean, Mike Tyson's an icon. There's a bit of that mystique where people were like, they're going to get to watch Mike Tyson fight, right? So that was exciting. But then I hadn't really thought much about Triller. I was very focused on the fighters I manage and trying to keep them busy and working with the promoters we work with, and things were moving along. And then, before that fight, George Kambosos Jr. had gone to London on October 31st. He defeated Lee Selby to become the mandatory for Teofimo Lopez, the undisputed lightweight champion of the world. And when that happened, we entered into a negotiation period, meaning our promoter, DeBella Entertainment, and Top Rank. And through that process, we had presented some ideas as wanting to bring this fight to Australia. We had some interested investors, but unfortunately in Australia, and still to this date, they have a mandatory 14-day quarantine, which means you get off the airplane, doesn't matter who you are. And which we saw this happen with the Australian Open, with these professional tennis players. You get taken to a hotel where you are hard quarantined for 14 days in a room. You cannot leave the room. You can't open your door. You're in that room. So that would have been very challenging to bring over ESPN, to bring over Top Rank, to bring over all the people that would need to come over. It just wasn't feasible. But the thing is during that time, we were never made an offer. Top Rank never made an offer to DeBella Entertainment in writing, text message, WhatsApp, verbal, you name it, pigeon carrier. We never got an offer. So as things were getting closer, I started to panic a little bit for my client, because you work so hard to become a mandatory. With a mandatory comes this added value of being able to go to purse bid, okay, which leaves it open to everybody. And you just can't let that go. And so in hindsight, when you look at it, and you wrote a really, really great article about this, Mike, how, Top Rank in essence was attempting to bully DAZN into not bidding, which means Top Rank would have been able to come in and possibly steal that bid for a low number. And I just really wasn't going to let that happen. And so what I did was, when I realized we weren't getting an offer and I realized purse bid was being called, and it was called, I had to do something. And I basically, threw a Hail Mary, and I flew out to California. I met with Ryan Kavanaugh. I explained to him the situation. What I said to him is, I said, Ryan, if you want to show people that you're serious about being in the boxing space, not just about influencers, not just about crossover fights and legends, but if you really want to make a splash, this is your opportunity. You have an opportunity to pay a premium. And make no mistake, he knows it was a premium. This wasn't like I sold him a bill of goods, but in order to really secure that opportunity and show people that you want to make a statement, that you want to be disruptive, that you're going to have to bid this type of number. And I went there as George Kambosos' manager. Make no mistake about that. Okay. And through this process, I got to know Ryan. The purse bid took place. And, after the purse bid, he had asked me if I would consider playing a bigger role for Triller Fight Club, which didn't exist during the first fight. Triller Fight Club was a company that was started with him and Snoop Dogg after the Tyson Jones fight. And so, once the purse bid was over, once he realized this big buzz that he received in that Triller, the word Triller in the space received, he realized he didn't really have a boxing guy per se. And I thought about it, and I said, I said I would love to pursue that, because what he's doing in this 4-quadrant type of entertainment is really unique. And so having the entertainers, the influencers, the legends / crossovers, and the real boxing, I find it to be exciting. And I think that, that it was a great opportunity. And I said yes.
I mean, Peter, I think you're giving Bernard Hopkins a run for his money for longest answer ever. So we appreciate it. We have a new record on the Poking Cobb Boxing Show, but we appreciate the insight. And a disclaimer for all the listeners, I will be on the Triller Fight Club broadcast next week with Jake Paul against Ben Askren. But Peter, so how did it grow into this new role now where you're basically doing everything on the boxing side? Because you are the boxing guy there. You're making matchups, going through the actual promotion of the fights, doing the undercard fights. I'm sure you're dealing with medicals and licensing and all of the nonsense that people don't see behind the scenes.
So you're right. And I'll say this, and maybe a lot of people don't know, maybe some people do know. When I was 22 years old, I started with Don King Productions. I'm 49 years old. I did airport runs. I folded chairs. I did medical runs. I swept the ring. I ran gloves. I did whatever I was told to do as the lowest person on the totem pole in boxing operations. And that's the way that you learn every aspect of a promotional company. And so, of course, over the course of a decade, I also learned and saw a lot. And you just learn how to really what it takes to be a promoter. And the other thing is, as a manager, I'm constantly at shows with my fighters, and I know what it's like to be on both sides of the table. And so while there's a lot of minutia, while there's a lot of detail when it comes to promoting, it's not foreign territory for me. So it was really easy in that sense. It's also helped me identify some of the voids or needs for the Triller team, which, you bring the right people in, and you make sure that you have people that know how to do those positions, and it makes things easy.
Yeah, I mean, Peter, to go back to what you were saying about the Teofimo and Kambosos deal, I just wanted to ask some questions, because for the listeners, maybe not everyone knows how the purse bid process works, but obviously this is supposed to be like a blind process where none of the fellow promoters know what the other one is doing. How did it come to, for Kavanaugh, how did he know like what price would get this fight? And at the end of the day, you can argue the case he overpaid given what the other bids were. So how did that whole thing play out?
So remember, when I went there, obviously I'm there as a manager wanting to really do the best for my fighter. Uh-huh. But at the same time, I really wanted to leave no chance. And then I'll say this: when we talked about this, I said, look, whatever you pair this with is going to help carry the pay-per-view. So we're not relying exclusively on Lopez Kambosos to get you the amount of buys that you need to cover and make a profit on that bid. I said, but at the same time, nothing would surprise me with Eddie Hearn and Matchroom in the zone. It wouldn't surprise me that they would feel the same way and that they would put an aggressive bid. And we truly believed that they would come in the $5 million mark, really to make a statement themselves, to take Teofimo and put him on the zone, which could then have set up, we were just kind of, in their mind, walking through it, right? If they have him or George on DAZN, it leads into a possible Devin Haney or a possible Ryan Garcia fight. All of a sudden, you have the next two fights.
Absolutely, and he had expressed enthusiasm for landing the Teofimo fight publicly.
With all respect, Eddie bid $3.5 million. Mm-hmm. That's a great bid. I mean, that is a great bid, and so that still would have made George over $1 million, and it would have made Teofimo, a lot of money. I mean, it was probably very fair market value for that fight.
One other question on this, just because you mentioned it to Mike, the bullying that took place from Top Rank to DAZN, is this something you found out after the fact in Mike's story, or is this something you were privy to even before the final numbers were posted?
I had no idea about any of this until I read Mike's story. And I read Mike's story when I was it might have been right after the Canelo fight. It seems right. Something like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I think, and no, I didn't know about it. I was shocked. I mean, honestly, it was shocking to me. Simply because that they were actual emails. Like, I found it to be shocking, but you know what it did? It reinforced to me that I did the right thing. It reinforced to me that what if it worked?
Yeah, exactly.
And I did the math, and I'm going to tell you something. If it would have worked, by the time George got his 35%, by the time he paid his provision of service to DeBella, he would have had $500,000. Then he pays me 10%, his trainer 10%. Let me tell you something. I did good.
It was an illuminating story that Mike had. Anytime that we can cast some sunshine on what goes on in the boxing business, which we know is not always on the up and up, I think it's a good thing. I wanted to, and let's do some more of that right here, because, I think a lot of fans are wondering, like, what is the extent of boxing, real boxing to come on Triller? Do you know any specific plans right now beyond Teofimo and Kambosos that you can talk about? And what exactly is your hope for Triller and what it does with genuine, honest to goodness boxing?
So let's look at April 17th first. It's a great question, because April 17th, we have Regis Prograis fighting Ivan Redkach. Regis Prograis, arguably one of the top 2 or 3 140-pounders in the world, lost a very close fight to Josh Taylor. And as far as I'm concerned, Prograis Redkach is a fight that PBC would have probably had as a Showtime or Fox main event. And I really do believe that is where what we're doing is we're introducing, and I say real boxing, right? I mean, world championship caliber boxing to this audience that might be coming to see Jake Paul. They might be coming to see Justin Bieber, but they're going to say, you know what? I really enjoyed watching that Regis Prograis, and I'm going to follow him on social. Now I'm going to follow him on Instagram. Now I'm following him on Twitter. Now I'm following him on Triller. And now when he fights the next time, wherever that is, I'm going to go watch him because now I'm a fan, or whomever, and that's the idea. So to answer your question, yes, every card is going to have that. And you'd be surprised. Every major promoter has called me and said, hey, how can we work together? How can we how can we do something? Because with the limitations on dates right now, just because of the way the world has been the last year, and we've seen it. There haven't been as many dates going around. There are a lot of promoters that have contracts that they need to fill, and they're not against the idea of provision of servicing somebody, making a fight, It's a win-win. They get paid. Now they hand their fighter over for one night. Okay. That fighter now gets exposed to an entire different demographic, culture graphic, and their stock rises because all of a sudden they might come in with 50,000 social media followers. They put on a great performance. They get promoted by all of these other celebrities and entities that are there. Next thing you know, they leave there with hundreds of thousands of new followers, and they take that with them back to their promoter.
Absolutely.
So, Peter, you mentioned Prograis Red Cash. Prograis, undoubtedly, that was no hyperbole. He's a great fighter, certainly one of the best pound for pound, top 25 or so. And to your point about PBC, Showtime, and Fox, PBC just had Danny Garcia and Ivan Redcash headline Showtime last year. So I think it is a worthy undercard fight for sure. What do you have planned, though, in the coming months? Because we know we have Teofimo Lopez against George Kambosos on June 5th. I'm sure you want to put a good undercard fight there. And then we have the Oscar De La Hoya, the Golden Boy, fighting. That's on July 3rd, right?
Yep, that's right. That's on July 3rd. I mean, look, Oscar De La Hoya, we're going to match him with a very interesting, very competitive, probably crossover fight. We'll probably see him fight somebody very competitive in the MMA space, which will be exciting. I mean, it's going to be an exhibition, and Oscar, I guess, hasn't fought professionally. Is it 12 years, 15 years? Do you guys remember?
2008 was his last fight against Manny Pacquiao. So
right. So look, I mean, it's Oscar De La Hoya. This guy's a legend. I mean, this is one of the best fighters ever to fight. And there's, once again, I really believe, and this is where Ryan's vision as a non-boxing guy is so refreshing, because sometimes we'll be talking and he'll say something, and then I'll remember he's looking at it from different eyes, right? He doesn't know the rules that we all live by, that we don't even know why we live by them, right? Like, why do we live by these rules in boxing that seem to be rules, but like, who made these rules? And why do we have to play by those rules?
Yeah, give me an example.
The way that we look at making fights. Who said it has to be? Look at the commentating team. Why has no one ever changed that up until now? I mean, it's entertaining. Why is it so? And look, let's give credit to other people. Like, I mean, Matchroom did the Jake Paul fight during Miami fight night, and I know that did well, right? And I think that just the way that adding the entertainment, like, why does it have to be a traditional? Why do we have to sign fighters? If the goal is to entertain and make money, why do we have to have 100 fighters under contract that we have to fight 3 times a year, where 3% of them might ever make us money? Why can't we just give people, like they used to do back in the day when Madison Square Garden just promoted fights and the Forum in LA just promoted fights, and they didn't have necessarily fighters under contract yet? That's kind of what I'm saying. So about De La Hoya, we might have an audience that feels that nostalgia, that wants to see Oscar come and look great. And then there might be this young audience who's heard about Oscar De La Hoya, and now they're going to get to see the Golden Boy fight.
Yeah, Peter, the question that we hear a lot, and I'm sure you hear it more than anyone, is how long is Triller really going to be involved and invested in boxing to this degree? Because we've all seen other players come into the space, come and go, Rock Nation and a host of others, 50 Cent. But do you think Triller's here for, I don't want to say the long haul, but the short-term long haul, or is this a kind of a flesh in the pan thing?
No, I think this is definitely long-term, specifically because of the fact that Triller's not signing fighters. They're not operating in this traditional space. They're going to do 4 to 5 shows per year. You know what I mean? And when you fight on a Triller show, it's just this great night of entertainment and exposure, not competing with Top Rank, not competing with Matchroom, not competing with Golden Boy, not competing with PBC, not competing with any of those promoters, just sort of really just adding. In fact, boxing should thank Ryan Kavanaugh and the concept of Triller Fight Club, because all it's going to do is bring younger fans into the sport.
Is there going to be like a ratio that you're going to have, like a fixed ratio per card? Like, we'll have one novelty fight, we'll have one old timer fight, we'll have one hybrid fight, and we'll have one real fight. How does that work?
I like Lance how he termed it, novelty and old timer. I prefer to call it, as Ryan says, legends and influencers. Okay.
Right.
So I think at the end of the day, even us, the 3 of us here, right, we're fight guys. I think we lose sight that there's a bigger world out there. And I introduced my 11-year-old. I have 3 boys, my youngest son, okay, Mateo. I introduced him to Jake Paul at the press conference in Las Vegas because during the Tyson Jones fight, and this is a true story, and I've said it time and time again because this is what stuck out in my head that night, was I'm sitting in my room, kind of waiting more for the main event to happen. And all of a sudden, my 11-year-old comes running downstairs screaming, "Jake Paul knocked Nate Robinson dead." And then he was done.
It's not funny, but it's true. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that's all he was interested in.
Uh-huh.
And then all he was interested in was the memes and following the reaction on social media, participating in the reaction, sharing those memes, because that's what interested him, because that's what he can connect to. And so I really believe that there's a bit of this for everyone. The nostalgia with the legends, the MMA versus boxing with the crossover fights. One of these days, one of these MMA guys is gonna upset one of these boxing guys, and people are gonna go crazy, right? And there's a little bit of hope in that, right? Then you have the traditional boxing. Our undercard has Lorenzo Simpson, has Quinton Randall.
Fantastic prospect.
Great talent.
Truck Simpson, yeah.
Right. And Truck Simpson, I mean, what a great place for him to showcase, and that's one of the great things about some of these guys that are independent, unsigned fighters. Why should unsigned fighters not have the ability to participate on shows? Why do they have to go the club show route? Why can't they have an opportunity? And you know what? This could end up leading to some of these guys getting signed. God bless them. I hope it happens.
Let's talk about Jake Paul quick, Peter, because we know how controversial he is, how much flack he gets. One thing I do want to say, well, 2 things. One is that all these fighters that hate on Jake Paul, he does a fantastic job promoting himself. And if more fighters did that and took the initiative, I think they'd be bigger too. Because this guy's been promoting the hell out of this event. And 2 is, I know I'm going to catch flack for this, but I've spoken to a lot of legit world-class fighters who tell me, you know what, Jake Paul is not bad. I know he's a novice, but that guy has hands. I know you've boxed a lot, that you've been around the game a long time. Tell the listeners though, what Jake Paul, when you talk to people, because I know you've seen him spar in the gym and all that, how good or not good is he?
I have a lot of respect for Jake Paul. And I'm not saying that because I'm with Triller. I'm not saying that because the show's coming out. I'm telling you that he eats, breathes, sleeps, and lives boxing. I'm friends with his trainer, former cruiserweight contender BJ Flores. And, Jake works hard. And look, this is his 3rd professional fight. Like, let's give the guy a break, right? I mean, the guy didn't come up as a fighter in the traditional sense, but I can tell you that his entire life revolves around being the best fighter he can be. And I really do believe, and by the way, physically, he's a big, strong guy. And I really do believe that as this progresses for him, whether or not Jake Paul ever ends up to challenge for anything meaningful as a professional fighter, he's improving. He's dedicated to the sport, and he respects the sport. And this is the guy that's going to go out there and leave it in the ring. And I'm not saying that lightly. I manage fighters. Okay, like I know boxing. I know fighters. This is his life. I mean, this is his life. This is something that he takes very seriously. And when you see somebody devoting that amount of effort and time and showing the respect to the sport, how can you not appreciate that?
No doubt about it. As much as, Mike talked about the promotion, and some of the promotion is actually very humorous and stuff like that. And so I think people can jump to the conclusion of he's not taking it seriously. But I can remember sitting ringside at the Staples Center with Jake Paul when I was interviewing his brother Logan before his fight. And Jake was listening intently to each question. He wanted to know as much as possible about boxing. And then you go into the gym with him at Wildcard and see how hard he works. Look, let's be honest. I mean, not to, to break down this fight thoroughly, but Ben Askren is a wrestler, right? And
right.
Jake Paul, definitely has a lot to fight for when it comes up on this Triller show, because there's a lot more before him. So I think it is, from that standpoint, it is going to be a pretty interesting event. And the other thing that I wanted to say, I don't know that was a question, Peter, but the other thing I wanted to say is what I thought that Triller did a great job with in that Tyson show was mixing in the music. I mean, you had, in my opinion, the best rapper ever, Snoop Dogg, you know, doing some great shows, an extended set. And just the way that they had that feel, it didn't look awkward. It fit right in between fights, and just that feel. I think does Ryan Kavanaugh also get the credit for that as well? Because just the way that balance was in play, I think that is going to bring in this younger audience that boxing needs.
Like I said, I step back sometimes on these Zoom calls that I'm now a part of, and I listen and I watch, because part of it is not playing by those rules.
Yeah.
I mean, he's basically, with the team, assembled a Grammy performance worthy talent for this coming show. Justin Bieber, Black Keys, Saweetie, Doja Cat, Diplo and Major Lazer, and then Mount Westmore. The first time that Snoop Dogg, Ice Cube, Too Short, and E40 are going to perform as a group. That alone is a pay-per-view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no,
you know. So I mean, then you add in. I mean, look, our Legends fight, our crossover fight is kind of interesting. Steve Cunningham stepped in for Antonio Tarver, who's going to be fighting Frank Mir. I mean, it's entertainment. It's called, you know, sports and entertainment. No one expects Frank Mir to win, but he's coming to fight.
I wanted to ask one more quick question, Mike. You know, you mentioned the idea of working with promoters, and, you know, hopefully that can happen for you, but I would say that that's probably not something that you can take to the bank on, given, you know, that they want to be selfish. Are you going to hone in on purse bids? You know, if there's high profile purse bid fights going on, is that when you're especially going to strike and say, let's bring those fights in? Because, you know, these are either title fights or significant bouts.
So I think one of the unique things about my position and me in this position is that I really truly feel that I'm well liked and have a good relationship with all the major promoters, because I work with them so closely with fighters that I actually manage that are with them. On the same night, on April 17th, for instance, I have Aaron Aponte fighting on the Matchroom show in Florida on the Demetrius Andrade show. I'll be in Atlanta and I have a guy fighting on the Matchroom show. But to answer your question, I really do believe that a lot of promoters, let's look at it this way. There are fighters that are going to be ESPN featured fighters, DAZN featured fighters, you know, PBC, Showtime / Fox featured fighters, right? Mm-hmm. And Golden Boy, DAZN featured fighters. Well, sure. Do I think that they're going to come to me and say, hey, let's take a guy off our platform and put him on Triller? I don't. But there are other fighters that would make very entertaining fights. Remember, I'm only obligated to make the best fights possible for fans, because it's a one-off. At the end of the night, those guys go home and they go back to their promoters. So that's number one, right? I do believe that you will see instances where that happens, where you'll be like, oh, interesting, but that's a Matchroom fighter fighting on Triller, okay, or a Golden Boy fighter, a Top Rank fighter, whomever, okay? Then the second part is, no, we're not honing in or zeroing in on purse bids, because once again, the statement was made. Lopez Kambosos, you know, that the statement that Triller wants to participate and not only bring in this younger audience with the entertainment and the influencers, but really wants to bring the hardcore boxing audience in. And we're hoping, and the thought process is that this undisputed lightweight championship of the world with Teofimo Lopez would bring that audience. Right. So in that sense, I think that is why I was able to convince Ryan when I went and made my pitch originally as just the manager, George Kambosos, that he understood that and he saw the value in that. I mean, look, a purse bid was just called for Philip Hergovich and Michael Hunter, and everyone assumed that we were going to go in and bid for this eliminator. No, I mean, it was a unique case. Now, if there's Ryan Garcia, Javier Fortuna, right? I mean, come on, that was interesting.
Yeah,
that was interesting, right? I mean, that'll make you think like, well, Ryan Garcia would be great on Triller. with that audience and then the entertainer. I mean, that would have been right, but they worked their deal out. That's great. But I mean, I think there's very few stars in boxing right now that could be worth going to bat like that is going to bring the hardcores. So I think it's just going to be a case by case thing. But I also do believe that we're going to work with other promoters, and I think you're going to see signed fighters come and do those one-offs.
Peter, last question before we let you go. We know you're busy putting out fires and the sort. This is going to be your first show actually working with Triller. And what do you hope the everlasting effect is when people who maybe don't watch boxing often watch your show next Saturday?
I'm hoping that we can get an audience that is coming to see Jake Paul find interest in the undercard and the Prograis Red Catch fight. And I'm hoping that they will take that and become boxing fans more than casuals. And I'm hoping that the hardcore fans will respect and enjoy a night of entertainment and appreciate that it has boxing in it. You know what I mean? And that they can appreciate that they were entertained. And, you know, I'll leave you with this. One of the things that stuck out in my mind after the Tyson Jones fight was that both Bruce Trampler and Kevin Iole applauded that. And I believe it was Kevin Iole or Bruce, I don't remember who, that said boxing can learn something from this.
All right, well, there you have it. Peter Kahn, Chief Boxing Officer for Triller. We sure appreciate the time, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's a pleasure. I hope to see you guys soon.
Thank you, Peter.